Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Enlightenment Hour. I am Morgan, the PurpleDon, whatever the hell you want to call me, and we are going to try different on the Enlightenment Hour today. We've had a couple of top five lists recently, and they're going nowhere, believe me. But following the release of Spider-Man Homecoming this past week, I have Nolan Dean, the biggest Spider-Man fan in the history of Spider-Man fans, joining me for this wonderful episode. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic. I've been playing the Michael Giacchino Spider-Man intro theme ever since I saw the movie, and I cannot wait to freaking talk about it.
Yes. Well, I think that's a nice starting point. I think we're just going to get straight into this. We are going to talk a bit of spoiler stuff, but we'll make it perfectly clear when we go into spoilers for those who have not yet graced Spider-Man Homecoming with their presence, or the other way around, whatever. But yes, let's start at the beginning. The opening theme with the Marvel Studios logo, the new as of last year Marvel Studios logo. It doesn't open with the standard music we've been used to from the MCU. It instead opens with
And I was so freaking happy.
it was wonderful. I was not expecting that. I will say that I did think, because obviously you have sort of thoughts on what's going to be in the film when stuff like that, and that's obviously a very, very famous piece of superhero music. Didn't expect it right at the start, and it just set the tone really well. It put a smile immediately on my face.
Same here, buddy.
It didn't really, and that smile didn't really go away for the entirety of, how long is it? 2 hours, 10, 15 minutes, something like that.
You're telling me a Spider-Man movie made you happy?
Spider-Man, yes, it did. Very few things make me happy, but this Spider-Man film was one of them. Yes, I'm just really what I want to get from this episode is your take on how sort of Homecoming is different to other Spider-Man films, and if that's better or worse. So, in a sort of broad, non-spoilery sense, what do you think of that?
I think Homecoming perfectly captures the heart and the feel of who Peter Parker and Spider-Man is, because I noticed this before. This movie does it in a different way, where it's Spider-Man actively going after the villains. Usually in the other movies, it's like, oh, the villains happen and he kind of reacts to them. And that's even in Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 1, movies that I love. But Homecoming felt like, I'm Spider-Man, I'm going to go out and stop these bad guys because I want to prove myself. And it was such a different, refreshing take. Plus the whole John Hughes angle I really love, because that's the heart of Spider-Man. He's a kid in high school, and he's also a superhero battling supervillains, and that's just really fun to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't even think about that, but now you mentioned the fact that in previous Spider-Man films, at least, the villains are there, and Spider-Man is sort of forced to deal with them because no one else really can. Whereas it's made perfectly clear that Peter Parker wants to go after the Vulture. Maybe not that other people necessarily want him to either.
No, and that's the perfect coming of age angle, because we saw in Civil War, this guy just loves being Spider-Man, and that's something I've not really seen before. It's a bit done in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but that's the last time I'll ever mention The Amazing Spider-Man 2 for this review, and
no more of that.
It's like we've seen Spider-Man be a tortured guy and feeling like he has to do this because of the whole with great power comes great responsibility thing. Tom Holland is a guy who just, you can tell he loves being a superhero, and it gives the movie a added sense of fun, and it, like you said before, it keeps a smile on your face.
Exactly. It certainly for me, it's certainly the most fun Spider-Man film. Over. Oh, let's just ignore background noise. It's fine. We know what recording this is like.
Yep.
But yeah, it's definitely the most fun Spider-Man film. And I'm not just saying that because I'm still a bit on the hype, which obviously I am. I only saw it a few days ago. But it is so much fun, and that whole John Hughes angle, you get that from Tom Holland. You get the fun from Tom Holland. You get the wonderful nervous teenager angle from Tom Holland that Andrew Garfield tried to do. I say tried for a reason. Tom Holland kind of he does that side well, and not to take anything off Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, of course, but not necessarily sort of nervous teenager in the same sense that Tom Holland was. Yeah, I mean, you bring up the John Hughes angle as well. It did at points feel less like a Spider-Man film and more just like a teen high school sort of comedy / drama, which works surprisingly. Like I really did like that aspect of it, and then it just kicks into gear as a Spider-Man film again.
It's like Spider-Man has one of the best supporting casts in like any comic history. Like even when you're reading the Ditko stuff and the Ultimate era, they make sure that you care just as much about his classmates and Aunt May and all the other guys just as much as you do care about him. And they treated the high school students in this exactly like the Breakfast Club, and I love them for doing that.
Yeah,
and it was very diverse too, just like how normal Queens is.
Oh, exactly. Very wonderfully diverse. I like that you said they treat it like the Breakfast Club, because I'm now just imagining that sort of what group was it? The smart kids. I forget the exact group that Peter's a part
Come
of.
on, kids.
What they called?
Academic decathlon kids.
Let's call them academic decathlon kids. They are very. Yeah, I like that. I like that you say they're similar to the Breakfast Club. I mean, seeing that as well, Flash Thompson, Tony Revolori. Didn't think he'd be. I'm not too familiar with Spider-Man comics, as people will probably know, but he's always Flash. In my mind, is Joe Manganiello from Spider-Man 1 and 2, and so he's just sort of a big hulking guy who just smashes things and punches people because he's just a quote-unquote bully. Tony Revolori seems like a very smart kid who's just so different in his interpretation of Flash, and that is just wonderful as well, because Revolori is just delightful, and it's just nice to see him be a bit of a bad guy.
There's 2 points I can bring up that I did kind of love with Revolori's character. One, I'm sure you kind of made this face when it happened in the movie, is when they're at the high school party and it immediately starts with DJ Flash. Like, this is a 2017 Spider-Man movie, and it just confirmed it. And I can't believe we were talking about this with Joe and Ashley yesterday and all the other guys around the Tough Channel. I can't believe we've never thought of Penis Parker as a Spider-Man joke.
I know, that's fantastic. Well done, writers of Spider-Man Homecoming and Tony Revolori. Wonderful insult. Everybody should use that. I'm going to start using that. I'm just going to call anyone.
Anyone called Peter is now called Penis.
Yeah, it just works. Be nice to people. Call them Penis Parker. I also want to bring up Zendaya's character that we'll go into. Not necessarily yet a lot, but I thought her character was just like, this film was very funny. Was much funnier than any other Spider-Man film. Was much funnier than most superhero films. like they often have their comedic elements. I know the MCU itself is known for having little injections of humor every now and again, but Homecoming seemed to take that to another level where it was essentially a high school comedy with Spider-Man in it. And Zendaya's character was just hilarious to me because she was just very sort of straight-faced and just like insulting people despite the fact that she herself is just lonely and has no one. And
She reminded me a lot of Ali Sheedy's character from The Breakfast Club.
Yeah, definitely.
But she's less gross than Ali Sheedy.
Less gross than Ali Sheedy.
She's not like putting pixie sticks in a sandwich and eating it. She's just having peanut butter toast at a party.
Yeah, she doesn't put put the dandruff on some sort of drawing that she does have, and she does, of course, draw in the in Homecoming. Zendaya's character known for drawing people. What was it? What was the quote? I like to draw people in distress or something like that. Which is just
it was something smart ass like that. She killed it at this role, but I do wish we had a bit more of her in the movie.
See, I was fine with what we got from her, to be honest. I didn't feel like I needed any more. I was happy with the amount we got, really. Yeah. I mean, she is great in it. I mean, for people that may be thinking Zendaya, is she really, you know, sort of a worthwhile actor to be putting in a big film like this? She delivers. She delivers entirely. And full credit to her for doing that, definitely.
Well, I've been a long time Zendaya fan because as an older cousin, I used to watch Shake It Up with my little cousin, and I got introduced to Zendaya and Bella Thorne from there.
Of course, Disney Channel.
She's very funny.
Yeah, she's great. I also have written down here. I have a nice list of points that I want to bring up. The fact that people may know that in terms of MCU films, I tend to prefer the sort of more different ones, the ones that aren't Iron Man and Captain America and Thor and things. Like my favorite MCU film is Ant-Man because it's just different. This Homecoming felt wonderfully different, even though Iron Man was, of course, in it. And this is something that I want to bring up because I was really worried with all the dodgy marketing that Sony likes to do with Spider-Man films and with this one as well. It seemed like we were getting a lot of Iron Man. I don't think Iron Man was overused at all, which I was really
used perfectly. Well, if you take back to the coming of age angle, I don't know if you've ever seen Boy Meets World, but Tony Stark kind of plays a role that's very similar to Mr. Feeney from there, where he's just like a mentor, father figure who's trying to give him advice. But we know what Tony Stark's like. He's not a perfect guy himself, so he's actually struggling with that. And it provided a nice little counterbalance between him and Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, Tony Stark can come off as quote unquote above everyone else when he's talking to other people, but so when when he's telling Peter like stuff like if you're nothing without the suit, then you don't deserve to have it, which is a great quote, but that's got to annoy Peter.
Oh yeah.
that is just got to annoy anyone. So you know, but yeah, it is a nice pseudo father-son relationship they've got going on, and I think that that relationship looks to be one that will continue for, well, I don't know, at least the next two major MCU Iron Man-based, Spider-Man-based films that aren't Thor or Black Panther. I think that will continue for at least the next two major MCU Iron Man-based, Spider-Man-based films that aren't Thor or Black Panther. I think that will continue for at least the next two major MCU Iron Man-based, Spider-Man-based films that aren't Thor or Black Panther.
I mean, I'm one of the few on this, but I actually prefer the look of the homemade suit to the suit that Tony Stark designs for him. It just feels like something that Peter Parker could make, and it still looks kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, the the suit, the full suit that Tony Stark makes is just like, it's essentially an Iron Man suit for Spider-Man.
It's parodying what the suit's like in the comics now. Like, I don't know if you read the current Spider-Man comics, but he's basically Tony Stark light, and he has that kind of suit. I think it's just like poking fun at that.
Okay, well, I suppose that's fair enough. But no, this is actually maybe a slight thing that I may have taken just a very, very minor issue with, is the fact that he seemed like he needed the suit for all of his powers. Like, as opposed to Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, who is my Spider-Man, right? I do not read Spider-Man comics, so my first introduction to Spider-Man was Tobey Maguire, who shot the web out of his actual wrists, didn't need to like create it or anything like that. And you see him have spider sense, you see him climb up walls when he's not wearing a suit. And I don't remember seeing it sort of, I don't know, weirdly, Homecoming gave off the idea, at least in the sort of first half, gave off the idea that he was nothing without the suit, and of course that turns out to not be the case. But do you get where I'm coming from?
I get you. I mean, like, I know that was a stylistic choice from Raimi to have them come out of his wrist because he didn't want to waste more time doing the whole Webshooters thing. But even in the 60s comics and every comic run of Spider-Man, he builds his Webshooters because all I have with Tobey Maguire is that I can't tell you that he's smart. Whereas when you see Spider-Man building his own tech and Tom Holland does that, it shows you how smart he is. And that's a big part of Peter Parker's character.
Yeah, that's a good point. Fair enough. You're the Spider-Man expert here. That is why I have brought you on to this particular episode. I essentially know nothing about Spider-Man, and I'm just here to tell you that this film was great.
It really was.
Do you want to get into a couple of spoilers?
Yes, because we haven't even mentioned it yet, and I can't believe I've stopped myself, but I want to talk about Michael Keaton as the Vulture, dude.
Okay, listeners, those that are listening, spoilers from here on in. If you have not seen Spider-Man Homecoming, go and watch it because it's wonderful, and then come back and listen to this second part, because there's some good story.
Oh, yeah. And you know what I was like? The second I heard that Michael Keaton was playing the Vulture, I was so excited because he plays Batman, he plays Birdman, now he's playing the Vulture. Is he just going to be typecast as guys with wings for the rest of his career?
I think he is. I think that's where we're at with Michael Keaton. I mean, he plays the Vulture very well. Especially for an MCU villain who, as a franchise, it's known for somewhat disappointing depictions of villains. But the Vulture, you got a really clear motive from him. You knew where he was coming from all the way. He's a very compelling character. He's an intimidating character. He's a cool looking character, to be fair. I'd have those wings.
Just as well he's not wearing the comic book costume because Keaton would look ridiculous in that.
Please describe the comic book costume of the Vulture.
The Vulture in the comics is literally like an 80-year-old man with a bird-like nose, and he's wearing green spandex with wings. And I don't think anybody wants to see Michael Keaton wear that.
No. Okay.
So they played up the pilot kind of angle with this take on the Vulture. And one thing I loved here with Michael Keaton is when it's in the beginning, like, there's two Shockers in this movie. The Shocker is also a villain here. One of them's Montana, which is a nice little nod to the Spectacular Spider-Man show. And Keaton just kind of goes on a tirade against him. He's like, "Oh, what, you calling yourself the Shocker now? What the fuck? What is this, pro wrestling?"
That was funny. That was funny.
And then this is one thing that bothered me, is that he takes a gun, he shoots him, and he gets vaporized. But immediately after, he's like, I thought it was the anti-gravity gun. And I thought it would have been a lot more intimidating and scary if he took the choice to kill him. Because Vulture in this movie's got like a Heisenberg, Tony Soprano mentality. And I think that would have made him more menacing.
Ah, that's it. I like that. I like Tony Soprano as... Tony Soprano, James Gandolfini, rest in peace, as the Vulture. That's what we need. No, we don't need that at all. Yeah, I like that sort of, because he does seem like a pretty ruthless character. So yeah, I get where you're coming from in the fact that it would have been almost better to just know that he fully meant to just kill this guy that was annoying him.
Yeah, and they do a thing with Vulture in this movie that reminds me a lot of what they did with Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2, because Doc Ock and Vulture in the comics are ridiculous. They're almost like walking cliches, and in the movies, they ground them to such an element where you're like, I could see a guy like this existing in the world, because they don't have superhuman strength. They rely on their tech, and the Vulture is so much cooler in this, like all the jacket, which has the little ruffles that the comic book Vulture has. I love that angle. And even the helmet, where you look inside it and it's like an evil version of how we see Iron Man in the hub with all the green colors. And homework when creating the Vulture for this movie.
Yeah, it's a very good character design, to be honest. And yeah, I mean, I will bring up, as we truck on with this length of episode, I don't even know how long we've been going on for. I do want to bring up the fact that now I know some people would have seen this coming from a mile off. I did not see the fact that Vulture was Lizzie's dad coming at all. Liz, of course, being Peter Parker's love interest in this film.
See, I thought it was going to be that he was Zendaya's character's dad. And that was going to be why she was all so snarky and everything, and it would have added a bit more to her. But when I saw him go up to the date to pick up Liz, and then he opens the door and you just see Michael Keaton there, I made like the most shocked expression I've had ever since, well, spoilers for Guardians of the Galaxy 2, since I found out that Ego was the villain of that movie. This gave me that moment. And the third reboot of a Spider-Man franchise in the MCU managed to surprise me. How the hell are they still doing that?
That just shows how good this film is, though. I think. I mean, I was as shocked as you, and I was just like, oh, okay, this is good. I like this. Come on, Michael, let's have it. And that was tense. That drive to, because of course the film's called Homecoming, so you know, Homecoming or the Homecoming dance is going to be a factor. We drive to the Homecoming dance with Peter and Liz in the back of the car, and the Vulture driving, knowing what the Vulture has done throughout the film, just intimidating Peter, because he kind of knows, and then he doesn't know, but then he does know, and it's like really just intimidating. And it's
Keaton just brought this intensity to that scene where it's just like, oh yeah, I gotta go give him the dad talk, and then he just turns around and you see he's got a gun in his hand. He's like, does she know? And it's just, it gave you that kind of fear of like meeting your date's dad, but added to a level, oh, you're meeting your date's dad and he's a supervillain.
Yeah, it's not really what any of us need. That is it. Imagine that. It'd be a nightmare. Anyway, no, there was that. I think the quote was in one of the trailers, which was like, if you try and stop me, I will kill you and everyone you know.
Which is a very generic line, but the way Keaton delivers it makes it seem scary.
Yeah.
Because he's just calm and he's just intense, but he never raises his voice.
And you get the entire sort of tense aspect of the drive there beforehand, and then that just sort of caps it off. Peter gets out of the car. He ditches Homecoming and then goes and stops.
And he fights the Shocker before that, which I wish we got a bit more of the Shocker in this movie. Like, even just like one scene to give him a bit more depth, like they were doing with Keaton. But it was really fun to see him fight a supervillain at his school. And something I love from Spider-Man comics is the last panel is usually him like webbing up the villains, and you just see them hanging there like they're idiots. I've never seen them do that in the movies before this one, because the Vulture's webbed up at the end, Shocker's webbed to a school bus at the end, and their homework. They knew what kind of movie they were making with this.
Yeah, definitely. I do actually remember, I think it's in a montage in Spider-Man 1, you see him web up some criminals, and they're like hanging from street lamps, if I remember rightly.
Oh yeah, he does.
I think that's a thing, but I know exactly what you mean. Major villains being webbed up. The Shocker to me, like, again, I'm not too familiar with Spider-Man comics at all, but the Shocker to me just seemed like a guy with a big glove on.
He's got a bit more depth. He's this guy who, while he was in prison, devised the way to create these gauntlets that flung vibrated air. So, because that was a method he was using to crack safes, and he used that to get out of prison. There's so much narrative potential there. Like, you could just say to the guy, dude, wait 10 years to get out of prison, patent that, and then make all the money you've ever wanted. But the Shocker just wants to be a criminal, and I think that's something that says a lot about Spider-Man's villains. Max Landis said this on Marvel Movie News, but they're brilliant people who have fundamental flaws in their personality. You get that with Vulture, you get that with Shocker, with Doc Ock, Green Goblin, all of them. They have that kind of angle.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I get that. Fair enough. Anything else you want to bring up spoilerish wise?
The way the emotion is handled in this, and there's two scenes I can bring up, as we know what happened at the ferry because this trailer's bloody showed it. But right after, when Aunt May is to him like, no bullshit, I want you to tell me what's going on. And he says, I lost the Stark internship. He's lying to her, but he's not really lying. And there's so much emotion in that scene. Like, he's crying and everything. And that just brought up the heart. And then later on, when he goes to fight the Vulture, this was probably my favorite scene, where they're just talking and he's like, okay, what are you going to stop me? Well, I needed time to get my suit airborne. And he's just crushed underneath this rubble. And that's exactly like a moment from the comics where he's crushed under rubble and he has to use all his strength to get out of it. And the fact that the voiceover of Tony Stark, I was worried for a second. I was like, please don't make Tony Stark get him out of this.
I know.
The fact he's in his homemade suit makes it even better. Like, without that fancy suit he had, with stuff that he made himself, he proved that he is Spider-Man without all that fancy tech. And it made me cry when I saw it.
Yeah, it was a very, very strong scene. Like, he was saying to himself, like, come on, Spider-Man. He was calling himself Spider-Man. He's just like, come on, Spider-Man, you can do this. And he's just like pushing this like heavy rubble. Like, come on, I'm stuck. Come on, Spider-Man, come on, Spider-Man. And it is really, really emotional. And you bring up that I've lost the Stark internship scene with Aunt May as well, which again, yeah, it is handled very well, the emotional parts of this. Like, sometimes emotional moments in films, sometimes, yeah, in superhero films can be sort of handled quite either heavily or just like, this seems false. But it never seemed sort of false, did it?
No, it didn't. And there's even a couple of really cool Easter eggs that I noticed. One, there's a criminal called Matt Gargan on the ferry, and I'm like, that's the fucking Scorpion, dude.
Okay.
Donald Glover's character says, oh yeah, my name's Aaron Davis. I have a nephew who lives in Queens, Miles Morales.
Yes, okay.
Character Aaron Davis in the Ultimate Run becomes the Prowler, which would be really cool for them to see do. And there's even like, even at the end scene, where he's fighting the Vulture, and Peter doesn't want to beat him. He's actually trying to save him. And that was a good way to bring up the whole with great power comes great responsibility angle without having Uncle Ben in it. Because it felt to me like, oh, if I let the Vulture go do this, Liz could get hurt. And what happened the last time I looked the other way? I lost my uncle. So he goes and even when he's fighting the Vulture, he webs him away to try get him out of the suit and saves his life, technically. And that pays off in the mid-credit scene where Matt Gargan comes up to him again. He's like, yeah, I heard you know who Spider-Man is. And he's like, he'd be dead already. Yeah. I think that's a cool little way to set up potentially a Sinister Six, because I said this in a video that I did earlier today. For the next movie, I want it to be Spider-Man teaming up with Donald Glover to become the Prowler, going up after Matt Gargan, who would become the Scorpion, because even in that end credit scene, it looked like he had something that he needed to walk with. So that could be a cool way to factor in the Scorpion suit. Scorpion's natural predator of the spider. You got a good angle there.
Absolutely. I mean, you're quite clearly more qualified to elaborate on what might be Spider-Man Homecoming 2, because I just hear these villains' names and I'm like, okay, not really too familiar with people like the Scorpion, but it clearly means a lot for Spider-Man fans, which is
he's exactly what he sounds like.
Okay,
it's a guy in a Scorpion suit.
Fair enough. But yeah, I did like that mid-credit scene though, because not even knowing that this guy was anyone, this Matt Gargan guy, just because Michael Keaton, Adrian Toomes says if I knew who Spider-Man was, he'd be dead already. It kind of gave me a sort of like, I'm not going to help you kind of vibe. So maybe there'll be a bit of something between those two.
Hope so. It's kind of like they have a mutual respect for one another right after what Peter did for him, like helped his daughter and everything. And I don't know if you had any flaws with the movie, but I'm kind of alone in this. I really did not like Ned Leeds.
Did you not?
No, I found him to be a very selfish friend up until the end of the movie. I'm Spider-Man. Let's use it to be popular.
Yeah, I get that, actually. I didn't even think about that. I was just too busy laughing at him because he was clearly
even when he phones Spider-Man, like right after he's going after the Shocker and that, he doesn't even say like, oh, are you okay? Maybe something happened. He's like, dude, you screwed up and now we're not going to be popular. And I'm like, Ned, shut the fuck up.
That's a good point, actually. Maybe I need to rethink Ned. Oh, Ned.
But he does have a little bit of redemption at the end where he webs the Shocker's glove up, which was kind of cool.
Yes, he does. And he gets to be Spider-Man's man in a chair as well.
Yeah.
For all of 2 minutes before Gloria off of Orange is the New Black comes and stops him.
Oh, and in the comic books, Ned Leeds becomes the Hobgoblin. I don't think this Ned Leeds is going to be the Hobgoblin at all.
No, I don't know. I don't think that at all. See, I actually do know who the Hobgoblin is.
Because Mark Hamill voiced them in the cartoon.
Doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would be a super villain, even a bit of a silly one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen at all. And there's one more little reference that I loved was when he's running through like a field, it's just like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And then immediately on a TV screen, someone's playing Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And he's just like, hey, it's a great movie.
Yes, that was fantastic. I probably disturbed people sometimes. Like, surprisingly, because I tend to go to the cinema in the middle of the day, I was kind of glad to see that this particular screening was pretty full.
Oh, a lot of Spider-Man fans.
There's a lot of Spider-Man fans in Manchester, apparently. And I was probably disturbing most of them who were around me. Like, for example, at that Ferris Bueller scene, we were just like, this is wonderful. Like, verbally just telling people this was wonderful. And I'm obviously sat there on my own, so, a bit strange, but, that was great. I really did like that. It is humor like that makes you sort of that makes it almost impossible to sort of not enjoy films like this.
It's just, they did it so well. And the minute I knew John Watts was going to direct this, I knew it was going to be a small scale, no sky beams coming up into the air. Because if you've seen Cop Car, he knows how to handle that kind of small scale action thing very well. If you haven't seen Cop Car, I highly recommend it. John Watts, I keep an eye out for him. And since they're going to do a sequel, it's probably not going to be Spider-Man Homecoming 2, but I'm kind of hoping it's like called Spider-Man's Day Off, and they just go full Ferris Bueller.
Yeah, I want Spider-Man Christmas Ball.
Just Spider-Man Winter Formal.
Yeah.
Spider-Man Stag Night.
Spider-Man Valentine's Dance. Just keep it.
Spider-Man Graduation is definitely going to be there.
Oh, that might be there actually. Spider-Man The College Years.
That could be a new trilogy. That could be its whole new trilogy.
It's kind of a weird title, but that's obviously where he's going.
Oh yeah, and I'm gonna order the Blu-ray for this as soon as I can. In fact, when I come see you in Manchester, maybe it might be out in HMV, and I might just go buy it with you.
Oh yes, that's a good point actually. That'd be a nice watch. Together.
Oh yeah,
that'd be lovely for everyone. I would actually like to bring up, before I sort of begin to wind down this episode, did you stay till the very, very end credits? Of course you did. It's a Marvel film.
I did.
That was the funniest part of the entire film.
The Captain America PSAs were so funny and well done. Like, you felt like how Peter was when he was in detention. Like, oh, so you got detention. He's just like, dude, shut up. I stole your shield a couple months ago. I don't need to hear this shit. Yeah. It's like oh, so good stuff, man.
I mean, they even make a point of saying, isn't Captain America like a war criminal now?
It just shows you what public schools are like.
After Civil War. But yeah, he's doing these ridiculous things. But that absolute end credits one, just I'm not even gonna necessarily say what it was, but please stick around for that. It is entirely worth it.
I was half angry when I saw it and then half amused, but it was so genius.
No, you weren't angry at all.
It was like, I thought we were going to get something for the next movie, and then I was like, no, this is really smart. I like this. Yeah. Chris Evans, you need to show off your comedic side a bit more, dude.
Yeah. Captain America, not necessarily the funniest character.
If Thor can do it, so can he.
Well, we have Thor Ragnarok and Taika Waititi to bring the comedy out in that. So, yes, I do want to ask just a couple of general questions to both you and people watching. Do you think that you needed to watch Civil War to get Homecoming?
I don't think so. I think you could... Watching Civil War might give you a little bit more extra stuff, but you can just watch this as a fun coming-of-age story with Spider-Man. A really great adventure, really cool villain, probably the best Spider-Man villain they've had on screen since Doc Ock. And I wouldn't say he's above Doc Ock, but he's sort of on the same level, and you're going to have a blast with this. If you like fun coming-of-age movies, if you like superhero movies, if you just like good movies in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know where to necessarily put the Vulture on par with Doc Ock, or I still like Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. I still really love Willem Dafoe.
I'd say Vulture, Ock, and Dafoe Goblin are my top three when it comes to live action Spidey villains.
Absolutely. Yes. Anyway, that should do us for this nice little casual chat, all on Spider-Man Homecoming. Nolan, thank you so much for joining me. What are you up to?
Anytime. Well, if you've been paying attention to my channel, you'll know that I've been doing video essays, and I recently did one for Spider-Man 2, which talked about Doc Ock and perfecting the sympathetic antagonist that just crossed 1,000 views, so thank you so much for that. And one on Spider-Man Homecoming when it comes out on digital HD. My angle is going to be like Spider-Man Homecoming when comic books come to life. And I still got to write the essay, but the fact that I had an angle immediately after I saw the movie tells me it's going to be a great one. And go check out my channel just now. I just put a little Spider-Man Homecoming sequel pitch idea. And news, Koi Jandro came on my show, Movies and Me, to talk Spider-Man and films. So my channel's like 100% Spider-Man right now, so go check that out. Have some fun. And Morgan, thank you so much for having me, dude. You are I'm not going to say you're the Ned Leeds to my Peter Parker. You are the Harry Osborn to my Peter Parker, because they're better friends.
Okay.
But you're not going to become a bad guy, so don't worry about that.
You see, I might have a bit of goblin inside of me, you don't know.
You are much more handsome than Dane DeHaan.
That's a very nice thing to say. But yes, basically, Nolan is Mr. Spider-Man at the minute, so please go and check out all the stuff he's doing. There will be links in the description to all of his wonderful stuff, and his video essays are killing, so it's just great.
Thank you so much.
As always, guys, you can check me out on Twitter at the PurpleDon. Check Nolan out on Twitter at Nolan Dean 27. Hashtag PDE Hour to carry on this weird Spider-Man conversation with us. And I think that's about it. Sub to this channel, sub to this iTunes feed if you're over there, rate and review. There's plenty more stuff going on here. Most of it is audio only. I'm trying to work on some new stuff. I'm gonna say this now. Nolan, you have you've been a bit of an inspiration to me into maybe pursuing some more stuff on this channel rather than just audio only stuff like I'm doing now, these rambly little podcasts. But if you do enjoy this, please share it around and show the love, because that'd be really nice of you. And yeah, guys, thank you as always for listening, and until next time, goodbye.